You might know about IUCN red list of species, but have you heard about IUCN green status of species? Today, we are going to check similar interesting current affairs from environment. I am 𝐂𝐧𝐯𝐢𝐫𝐫𝐫𝐫. Welcome to weekly environmental current affairs session powered by Amrita IAS Academy. Let's begin. Let's check out the first news. Inside the wildfire crisis raging across France and Spain, explained. This is an explained article from The Hindu. So last month we have witnessed worst wildfire season in the history of Europe, mainly France and Spain. So what are the reasons for the recent wildfire incident? The increasing number of recent wildfire incident in Europe is the question asked here. So let's check out the answer. So why France and Spain are facing severe wildfire crisis? There are certain reasons that you have to understand. The main reason is being the climate induced extreme heat wave and prolonged drought are the main reason behind the recent increase in wildfire in France and Spain, and all throughout Europe you can see this phenomena. Okay, so strong winds, fuel load, rural depopulation and monoculture forest are being the other things which perpetrated this incidents. So what caused for rural depopulation? Because recently Europe has witnessed a decrease in population and most of the people have relocated from rural area to urban area, and this rural depopulation has caused for abandoned farms and reduced grazing, and this caused for fuel accumulation, combustible biomass accumulation there. And monoculture forest is also a reason where which contains flammable oils. These kind of monoculture plantations, the plants produce flammable oils which burns rapidly, and that is also one of the reasons behind these recent incidents. Okay, the primary cause being the climate change induced extreme heat waves and prolonged droughts. So these are the reasons that you should know. But related to this news, you have to remember two specific words. The first one is fire weather. What do you mean by fire weather? Related to the recent events of increasing fire events in Europe, you have to know a new word called fire weather. What do you mean by fire weather? So fire weather refers to atmospheric conditions favorable for wildlife ignition and spread. So what are these atmospheric conditions which favors wildlife ignition and spread? So these are high temperature, low humidity, strong winds and dry vegetation. These are the four ingredients which can cause fire weather. And this fire weather, the term fire weather should be noted. You can use this term in enriching your answer for mains. And the next important term you have to note is pyrocumulonimbus clouds. So this otherwise called fire clouds. So how these fire clouds are formed? So fire clouds are formed due to large wildfire generation. So when wildfire is generated, these kinds of clouds are formed, and these kinds of clouds are called pyrocumulonimbus clouds. So what is the reason for generation of pyrocumulonimbus clouds? They are generated during large wildfire due to intense heat and strong conventional currents. Okay, so this clouds, how they do it, what are the effects of these clouds? These clouds can cause lightning, strong downdraft, fire tornadoes and new wildfires that can aggravate new wildfires. So you have to know the term pyrocumulonimbus clouds related to this news article. Okay, now we have to see the technological tools which can be used to mitigate these kind of fire events. So what are the technological tools? Very important for your mains examination. Satellite monitoring can be implemented, and while learning about satellite monitoring, two instruments you have to specifically note. The instruments are MODIS and SNPP VIIRS. So these are two instruments in some of the satellites. So MODIS, Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, is a sensor on NASA's Terra and Aqua satellites. NASA has two satellites in the orbit, Terra and Aqua, and these satellites has got a specific sensor called MODIS, Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, which can track fire events. Okay, and another sensor is on Suomi NPP satellite, and Suomi National Polar Orbitals Partnership Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite, that is the full form of SNPP VIIRS. So this also should be there in the answer when discussing about technological tools which can be used to tackle wildfires, mainly in Europe and US. Okay, so GIS mapping can also be incorporated, remote sensing can also be incorporated, and real-time forest fire alerts can be sent through mobile phones, similar to IMD sending messages, warning messages in India. Real-time forest fire alerts are sent in Europe. Okay, So these are the various technological tools, but the international initiatives to control fire should also be noted. European Forest Fire Information System is one such initiative. Copernicus Emergency Management Service. So Copernicus is a satellite cluster of European Union. So this Copernicus Emergency Management Service is one of the methods in which fire can be tackled. Then Sendai framework should also should always be there in the answer related to any disaster. Whenever a disaster is asked, the Sendai framework, which is for 2015-2030 period, should always be there in the answer. Okay, so read more about Sendai framework. Read more about Sendai framework. Now we will check out the next topic. The next topic is also also related to the fire events only. So this was a news in the Hindu. So there is a probability that this can be asked for preliminary examination. Okay, Europe pioneers firefighter donkeys to prevent wildfire. Firefighter donkeys to prevent a wildfire. This is interesting, right? This is an interesting thing. So this donkey is in picture here. So this donkey is being used in Spain and Portugal to as natural fire break managers. What these donkeys will do? These donkeys will graze on dry grasses, shrubs and undergrowth and remove the biomass which are combustible and reducing the combustible biomass. So this can be quoted as a nature-based solution to prevent wildfire. Very important, nature-based solution. If you have to write this example in mains examination, you can use this, and this is one of the nature-based solution which is implemented in Europe widely, mainly in Spain and Portugal. Okay, this was a news article in the Hindu. Let's check out the next article. Next article is related to eco-sensitive zone. So recently the center reissues notification related to eco-sensitive zone. So let's check out the news. The Union Ministry has reissued for the 7th time in over a decade, in the last 10 years, its draft notification proposing an ecological sensitive zone across the Western Ghats. So this was specifically for Western Ghats after the previous draft lapsed on July 27. So the latest draft issued on July 27, 2026 will remain open for public objection for 60 days before the center consider reissuing a final notification. So the final notification is not yet out. The draft notification is open for public objection for the next 60 days starting from July 27, and after that only the final notification will be out. No, so related to this article, we have to see the eco-sensitive zone. What do you mean by the concept eco-sensitive zone? So eco-sensitive zones are, by the term itself, it's really clear. They are sensitive zones. They are ecologically sensitive regions. Okay. Ecologically sensitive zones are buffer areas around protected areas notified under Environmental Protection Act of 1986. So there are certain areas which are notified under Wildlife Protection Act, National Park, Wildlife Sanctuary, Tiger Reserves. All these areas, around the area, we sometimes require buffer zones to minimize negative impact on human activities, protect biodiversity, act as a shock absorber around protected areas, promote sustainable development, and various other reasons. We need a shock absorber region, a buffer region, and that buffer region will be is known by the name eco-sensitive zone. So eco-sensitive zone are the buffer area around the protected area. They are notified from time to time by the government only. So in 2011, the government has drafted a notification, and in that notification, the government has identified certain activities which are restricted in eco-sensitive zone, which are regulated in eco-sensitive zone, and which are permitted in eco-sensitive zone. So in eco-sensitive zone, certain activities have been identified. In the 2011 notification, 26 activities have been identified, and out of that 26 activities, certain activities prohibited in eco-sensitive zone, certain activities were regulated. Regulated means with permission you can do that activity. Okay, but certain activities were permitted. You need not have any permission, that are permitted every time. Okay, so what are these 26 activities and what are the classification of these 26 activities is important. Okay, is important, can be asked for your prelims, can be used as points in mains. Okay, so the prohibited activities include 8 in number. So these activities have not been changed after that. Okay, so after this year's notification, we will see which are the activities which are included or negated from this. We have to see that, but this is the right now, these are the activities which are prohibited, regulated and permitted. So this is based on the 2011 notification. After that, many notifications came, but this change was not made on these activities. So let's check out the prohibited activities in eco-sensitive zone. Prohibited activities include commercial mining, setting of sawmills, setting of industries causing pollution. That pollution can be water, air, soil, any kind of pollution. Okay. Then commercial use of firewood, establishment of major hydroelectric project, establishment of new hydroelectric projects, use of production of any hazardous substances, undertaking activities related to tourism. It's related to tourism like flying over national park area by an aircraft or hot air balloons. So flying over national park area by aircraft or hot air balloons for tourism purpose is not allowed. Discharge of effluents and solid waste in natural water bodies or terrestrial areas. So these are the 8 activities which are prohibited, which are enumerated in that notification. So which are the activities which are regulated? That is the next thing. The activities that are regulated are felling of trees, establishment of hotels and resorts, drastic change of agricultural system. Drastic change of agricultural system. It's not agricultural system that is prohibited. Agriculture, ongoing agriculture and horticultural practices by local communities are permitted activities, but any drastic change of agricultural system is prohibited. Then commercial use of natural water resource including groundwater harvesting, erection of electrical cables, fencing of premises of hotels and lodges, use of polythene bags by shopkeepers, widening of roads, movement of vehicular traffic at night. So that can be regulated case to case basis, and from time to time vehicles can be permitted or can be restricted. Okay, so movement of vehicular activity and traffic at night is a regulated activity. Introduction of exotic species, protection of hill slopes and river banks, air and vehicular pollution. So air and vehicular pollution are coming under regulated activity, while industries causing pollution are prohibited activities. Okay, signboards and hoardings. So these are the 13 activities which are regulated, and the 5 activities which are permitted are easy: ongoing agricultural and horticultural practices by local communities, rainwater harvesting, organic farming, use of renewable energy sources and adoption of green technology for all activities are permitted activities. So that's all about the activities. Now let's check out the facts related to Western Ghats, because this eco-sensitive zone has been established in Western Ghats. This is specific, this recent notification is specific to the Western Ghats region. So Western Ghats is actually a biodiversity hotspot. One of the 4 biodiversity hotspot is Western Ghats. So it's included in UNESCO World Heritage Site, because 39 sites in Western Ghats are really important as a heritages, 39 separate sites, and all together the Western Ghats is included in the UNESCO World Heritage Site, because there are 39 really important heritage spots in Western Ghats. Okay, then the legal basis of eco-sensitive zone also should be noted. The legal basis arises from the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. Even though the Environmental Protection Act doesn't explicitly say about the eco-sensitive zone, it implicitly comes from the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 only, not from Wildlife Protection Act. Okay, then understand that the eco-sensitive zone, the concept called eco-sensitive zone, the Western Ghats, the entire Western Ghats has been declared as, a study was conducted by a committee headed by Gadgil, and it noted that the entire Western Ghats should be notified as eco-sensitive zone. But the government did not agree to that. There was widespread protest all throughout the Western Ghats region. The people were actually in panic, because there are certain activities which are prohibited and there are certain activities which are regulated, and many kind of false news were spreading during that time. And after that, in the next year itself, high-level working group chaired by Kasturirangan was formulated, and this Kasturirangan committee actually reduced the eco-sensitive zone in Western Ghats 1/3 to 1/3 of the previous report. Okay, and the current proposal of eco-sensitive zone is based largely on the Kasturirangan committee recommendations only. Okay, so this is the glimpse that you have to know The Gadgil committee and Kasturi committee is entirely a different, is for a different day. If you want to discuss that, that will take entirely 1 hour or 2 hour session. So please go and check out the report, the Gadgil committee report and the Kasturi committee report in detail. Okay, now let's move on with this topic. So the next news is also from a related topic. It's about environmental clearance. So the Supreme Court has recently clarified the legal position on post facto environmental clearance under Environmental Impact Assessment Notification 2006. So what do you mean by environment impact assessment and what do you mean by post facto environmental clearance? That is the thing that you have to know here. So while reaffirming that prior environmental clearance is the norm, the court held that the post facto clearance may be granted only in exceptional circumstances and cannot become a mechanism to regularize deliberate violation. So that's the news, and you have to know about environmental clearance. What is the difference between post facto environmental clearance and prior environmental clearance, and what is the stand of Supreme Court recently? Okay, let's check out the details. What is environment impact assessment is the first thing that you have to know. So environment impact assessment. So as the phrase itself says, environment impact assessment, we have to assess the impact on the environment. Why? Suppose a developmental project is happening, it's a very big project, suppose it's a very big project coming in the middle of a forest region, you have to give clearance to start that project. But before giving clearance to start that project, you have to assess the impact on environment due to that project. And that is simply what is meant by environment impact assessment. So environment impact assessment is a process of identifying, predicting, evaluating and mitigating the environmental impact of a proposed project before it is implemented. Okay, after doing environmental impact assessment only, in normal cases we can give permission to start a developmental project. Okay, so the objective of environmental impact assessment is protect the environment, promote sustainable development, prevent irreversible ecological damage, improve project planning, facilitate informed decision making. So all these are objectives of environment impact assessment. But the facts related to environment impact assessment, what do you mean by prior environment impact assessment, how do we conduct environment impact assessment, and what do you mean by post environment impact clearance? Okay, so we will check that. We have to have a clear idea about the prior environmental clearance in environmental impact assessment and post facto environmental clearance. So Supreme Court recently has made it very clear that prior environmental clearance is the norm, but in special situation, if the situation is really worth it, we can give post facto environmental clearance as well, but that is not the norm. So what do you mean by prior environmental clearance? As the word suggests, prior environmental clearance is the approval before starting construction, expansion, modernization, mining or industrial operation. Before starting the construction, it can be the construction, it can be the expansion, it can be the modernization, mining or industrial operation. Whether a new project can come there or the existing project can undergo modernization or expansion, whatever it is, the prior approval, prior clearance should be there. That is mean by before starting that clearance should be there. That is simply mean by prior environmental clearance. Okay, so this is based on precautionary principle. Very important. This point should be included while writing the answer. Precautionary principle that prevents harm rather than remediate it. Okay, but what do you mean by post facto environmental clearance? You start the project first, then after that you will apply for clearance. Does that make any sense? No, right? The whole purpose of getting environmental clearance is to address whether that project can first of all come in that place, or what are the measures taken to mitigate the effect of that project. But due to post facto environmental clearance, the environmental damage may have occurred already, and this is granted only in exceptional circumstances and not as a matter of right. That is what Supreme Court has recently made it very clear. Okay, so that's the difference between prior environmental clearance and post facto environmental clearance. Now you have to have you have to know the basic facts about environmental impact assessment. So this is this is coming under the umbrella legislation of Environmental Protection Act of 1986, and government has made notification related to the EIA notification of 2006. Okay, so the granting authority can be Ministry of Environmental, Forest and Climate Change and state level environmental impact assessment authority. And key constitutional provision also should be noted. Right to healthy environment under Article 21, right to life, is the thing that is guaranteeing this environmental impact assessment, and precautionary principle is the principle that you should be noting in the mains paper. So the 8 steps of the EAA process also should be noted. The first process is the screening process. Suppose a project is being planned, and you have to see whether environmental impact assessment is required for that project or not. If that project is a very small project, suppose a small vending shop is coming near by a river, does that require environmental clearance is a question that you should ask. Suppose a very big hotel or a resort is coming near that river, which will require the environmental clearance? Obviously, the resort will require environmental clearance, and sometimes the small shop also might be requiring environmental clearance. So the screening should be done first, whether that project requires environmental clearance. The second step is scoping. The scope of environmental impact assessment, how the study should be done, on what scale the study should be done, how much will be the impact, all that scoping should be done in the second stage, and the impact analysis is done on the third stage, and mitigation measures are suggested, and mitigation measures will be analyzed, and the report will be finalized, and environmental impact report will be finalized, and review of EAA will be done. And the seventh step is whether that project can be rejected or approved should be done. After reviewing the environmental impact assessment, review means the people will be given a chance to question certain aspect of that environmental impact assessment. That environmental impact assessment will be made public, and people can ask question, people can suggest measures, the public scrutiny will happen. Okay, and after that decision making step, that project can be rejected or approved, and further changes can be also suggested. Okay, then if the project is approved, post monitoring is done also under environment impact assessment. So this systematic approach to ensure sustainable this is a systematic approach to ensure sustainable development. So that's all about environment impact assessment. Let's check out the next news. Coexisting with tigers outside reserves. Coexisting with tigers outside reserves. This is an important topic because human wildlife conflict has been in news recently, has been increasing due to various reasons, and one of the reasons for human impact, one of the animal in picture is tiger. So coexisting with tigers outside reserve, there is a scheme that is introduced by the government. The objective of Tiger Outside Tiger Reserve Initiative. So this is an initiative. Tiger Outside Tiger Reserve Initiative. Tiger Outside Tiger Reserve Initiative is to establish scientifically grounded landscape-based approach. Scientifically grounded landscape-based approach for conserving tigers outside protected areas while safeguarding human lives. So you have to understand that not 100% of the tigers are inside protected areas. So there are specific reserves for tigers to protect tigers. There's reserves in India are called tiger reserves. There are more than 58, around 58 tiger reserves in India right now, and tigers are not only seen in these tiger reserves. So tiger reserves are protected based on a core and buffer strategy. There is a core area exclusively for the protection of tiger, and there will be buffer area, and tigers are seen outside this protected area also. And if you take the number of tigers, if you want to know the number of tigers seen outside the tiger reserve, based on the status of tigers 2022 survey, the tiger census 2022, that was the last census. The data we know from the last census is that 23% of India's tiger occurs outside the protected area, while the remaining 77% are found within or nearby the protected area. So this fact is important. 23% of the tigers in India, based on the status of tigers 2022, the tiger census of 2022, are seen outside the protected area, and 77% of the tigers are seen inside the protected area. And that is why it is important to have an initiative like this, Tiger Outside Tiger Reserves initiative. Okay, and you have to know the basic facts about tiger population as well in India. The overall, if we consider the tiger population in the world, around 70% of the tiger population is in India only. So this conservation has caused for one thing. The tiger population has expanded and many reserves are nearing their ecological carrying capacity. And if the ecological carrying capacity exceeds, means what will happen? The tiger population will start going to nearby places, and young tiger disperse beyond reserve boundaries, and human tiger interactions are increasing, and that is why it's important to have an initiative like tiger outside tiger reserve initiative. Okay, so why are tiger moving outside? We have already seen this growing tiger population, the carrying capacity has reached. Connected landscapes also play an important role. The conservation efforts that we have taken in the last few years have increased the landscapes, the connected landscapes between tiger reserves, and that has caused for the crossing of tigers between various landscapes and caused for and the tigers moving to new territories has been happening frequently. Okay, so these are the various reasons why tigers are moving outside tiger reserve, and climate changes related connection also can be linked with it, and the wildlife corridors play an important role in this. Okay, but the important thing that you have to know is the emerging conservation approach related to tiger conservation. The three approaches or the three pillars of this approach should be noted: landscape based conservation, community based conservation, and technology based monitoring. So these three pillars should be there in your answer while answering anything related to wild animal conflict, the emerging conservation approach. Okay, so landscape based conservation include obviously tiger reserves, territorial forest corridors, community lands, agroforestry landscapes. All these landscapes are included in landscape based approach. So that is the approach that we have been following for some years, but here community involvement should be increased so that compensation for losses should be made, ecotourism benefit should be there to the community, the livelihood of the community should also be increased, and participatory forest management also can be done as a part of community based conservation, where local communities become partners in conservation and benefit sharing. Okay, then technological based monitoring also should include points like camera trap, radio, GPS collars, AI based conflict prediction, drones, and satellite monitoring, where all these approaches together will increase or improve the emerging conservation of tiger when the tiger population is actually increasing. Okay, related to tiger, one more news is really important from the last week. The Global Tiger Day is celebrated on July 29th. So the date can be asked for your prelims, and why this date was chosen, and the importance of this date is that it is the Global Tiger Day, and this date was chosen in the St. Petersburg Global Tiger Summit, which happened in 2010. And as a part of that St. Petersburg Global Tiger Summit, many initiatives were launched like T2X, etc. And as a part of that, the date July 29 was selected to celebrate the Global Tiger Day. Okay, just remember this also. The next news is a pollution related news. Urban Indian private school at risk of proximity to toxic lead site report. So this is a report related to lead pollution. So the urban Indian private schools are nearby toxic lead sites is the article is the report says. So the recent report highlighted the thousands of private schools in urban India are located close to toxic lead contamination sites. So first of all, we want to know more about lead and lead related pollution. So what is lead? Lead is actually a element which has atomic number 82. So it's a heavy metal. 82 means it's heavy, really heavy. Okay, so heavy metal, but even though it is heavy, it's actually soft. The color is bluish gray. Okay, so that are the basic things that you have to know about lead. Understand that it's a non-biodegradable metal which persists in the environment for a long time, and since it is persisting in the environment, it also bioaccumulates in living organism, and it goes for biomagnification. Bioaccumulation leads to biomagnification. What is the problem with this? That is the thing that you have to know. So lead is actually a pollutant which has no safe level of exposure, and this causes for brain developmental problem, in lower intelligence, behavioral problems, growth, and it affects nervous system as well. So it can have multitudinal effect where it mainly affects the nervous system including brain. It can decrease the IQ level in a person. Okay, so that is why lead is a very dangerous pollutant. And what are the major sources of lead pollution is the important thing that you should know. The sources can be divided into industrial source, urban source and household source. So battery manufacturing, battery recycling, smelting industries, metal processing, paint manufacturing, cable industries all can cause for lead pollution. They are included in industrial source. Then e-waste recycling, electronic industries, construction debris, demolition waste and contaminated urban soil are sources of urban pollution, urban lead pollution. Then lead based paints are there. Then old plumbing instruments, not the recent plumbing instruments, the old ones used had lead contamination. Then ceramic glazes also sometimes have lead in it. Then some of the traditional cosmetic products have lead in it. Okay, then toys also have lead containing paints. So these are various household sources of lead pollution. So the various sources of lead pollution is important because if you check the PYQs related to pollution, the sources have been asked. Okay, so that's all about the sources of lead pollution. Now related to this lead pollution, the article itself, there is a term that is really important: environmental justice. What do you mean by environmental justice? So environmental justice ensures fair treatment and equal protection for environmental harms for all. Okay, so we have seen the negative impact of lead, and the article says that many private institutes, private schools in India are near lead pollution sites. What is the harm with that? Because one thing is that lead is a harmful metal, but it children but children are more vulnerable to lead pollution. Why? Higher absorption of lead than adult is one thing. In children, the lead is absorbed at a higher rate. Then children brain are developing in a developing stage, right? And in the developing stage, if lead pollution, if lead enters our body, what happens is that it hampers the development of brain. And understand that in schools and all, children, small students, their hand to mouth behavior is on a higher frequency than adult, and there is a possibility that lead can reach at a higher rate in children. And rapid growth and developmental stage, and if the lead pollution happens in that stage, that contamination happens in that stage, that can impair the IQ of that student. So even though children do not cause or are the least contributing to the lead pollution, they are the one who bear the highest burden, and that is why the concept called environmental justice should be discussed, because those who are causing the lead pollution are not the one who are actually having the impact of that. Poor and vulnerable communities are more likely to live near hazardous waste sites, and schools in densely populated urban areas may be located close to legacy industrial contamination, and in those schools mostly poor children will be children from poor families will be studying, and that is why the term called environmental justice can be utilized whenever a pollution related question is asked. Okay, so environmental justice is a term to remember from today's news. Let's check out the last article for today. SCNBWL recommends adding pygmy hawk to the list of critically endangered species. So it's a species related topic, pygmy hawk. So the species in picture here is the pygmy hawk. So as the name suggests, it's pygmy. It's a small hawk pig. It's the smallest and rarest hawk species in the world. So let's check out the facts related to this. So the Standing Committee of the National Board for Wildlife has recommended that the pygmy hawk be included in the list of critically endangered species under centrally sponsored scheme integrated development of wildlife habitat. So facts related to pygmy hawk is important. What do you mean by integrated development of wildlife habitat? The basic facts also should be learned. Okay, so this is the distribution, this is the regional distribution of pygmy hawk. So where is it? It's in Assam, right? And some of the distribution also goes to Bhutan And in the recent years, in the last 10 or 20 years, pygmy hog has not been reported from Bhutan. It has only been reported from Assam, the Manas National Park. So if a question related to the distribution of pygmy hog is asked, you can write that it is actually endemic to the Manas National Park in India. But previously, the distribution of pygmy hog actually extended to western UP, and it was noted in West Bengal, and it was noted even in the national parks of Bhutan. Okay, so the range has really been restricted now, and that is why you have to understand that the number of mature individuals is only 100 to 250, and this is cited as endangered according to IUCN. It's actually included in the IUCN endangered category. And here one more category can be seen in green. So this category might be new to you. IUCN critically depleted category. So this category is the green status assignment category. So what do you mean by green status assignment also should be understood. So IUCN green status of species measures the recovery and conservation success of species. So what does the IUCN red status of species note? It actually notes the threat perception. What is the threat on that species? But IUCN green status of species measures the recovery and conservation success of species. Recovery and conservation success of species, complementing the red list by assessing how far a species is being fully recovered. So these categories are given here, from extinct in the wild to critically depleted, largely depleted, moderately depleted, slightly depleted, fully recovered, intermediate, and not evaluated. So these are the various categories of IUCN green status of species. Okay, so here pygmy hog is categorized in IUCN species recovery category as critically depleted. That means it requires more action to make it largely depleted or moderately depleted. Okay, that is why the government has decided to include, or the National Board for Wildlife has decided to include it in the integrated development of wildlife habitat scheme. Okay, now you have to know more important facts about pygmy hog. So we already saw that it's actually and it's an endangered species, but understand that it's the world's smallest wild pig. So its presence indicates the health of that grassland. So if you can see the presence of pygmy hog in a grassland, you have to assume that grassland is healthy. So it's also an umbrella species where protecting its habitat can conserve other species like Bengal florican, hispid hare, swamp deer, grassland birds, and wetland biodiversity. So the important role, that is the functional role of pygmy hog, should also be noted. Maintains grassland ecosystem balance, ecological balance, contributes to nutrient cycling, and helps sustain biodiversity in floodplain ecosystem. So usually grasslands are often called the forgotten ecosystems, and protecting pygmy hog means protecting the grassland, and that is why it's really important to protect pygmy hog. And integrated development of wildlife habitat is a scheme, and the pygmy hog, the suggestion to include pygmy hog in this species recovery program under the integrated development of wildlife habitat has been made by the National Board for Wildlife. So what do you mean by integrated development of wildlife habitat? So this is a scheme by the central ministry, and this is a centrally sponsored scheme under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and the objectives are multifold. Mainly the wildlife conservation, habitat improvement, species recovery, protection of endangered species, and strengthening protected areas are the objectives of integrated development of wildlife habitat. And there is a specific initiative under this scheme called species recovery program. 22 species are there in that program, and if we include pygmy hog, it will become 23. So the number is not that important. Please go and check out the various species included in this species recovery program under the integrated development of wildlife habitat. Really important for your prelims. Many species from this species recovery program has been asked. The facts about that species have been asked in the previous years. Okay, please go and check out the species, the details about the species. That's all for today. Let's see next week. Thank you.
Amrita IAS Academy.